Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Monday afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. So this is our webinar presentation, the Society for Black Neuropsychology and the Association of Neuropsychology Students and Trainees, ANST, our webinar series. We're going to be talking today about preparing for clinical psychology internship interviews as a minority student. So we're very excited for the panelists that we have today from different perspectives across the spectrum of trainee to people who are going to be doing these interviews. You may be sitting with some of these individuals in an interview context. So please be on your best behavior. You know, like I said, we're going to be just doing a Q&A where we've already got some questions, but we want everyone to think about questions that they might have. Our panelists are going to introduce themselves. They're going to tell a little bit about what they do and where they're at in their training or clinical experience. And then we're just going to get right into the Q&A part. We want this to be very targeted in terms of you all being able to get the information that you need and coming away with a better sense of how to interview as a candidate in this COVID climate. So with that, I will go ahead and give it off to Dr. Stringer to let him introduce himself, and we'll just go down the line.
Well, thank you. I'm Dr. Tony Stringer. I'm a professor in the School of Medicine at Emory University, and I'm the director of the Rehabilitation Neuropsychology Division at Emory. I started the internship training program and the fellowship programs at Emory. We've had an internship for 20 years, and for most of that time, I was the director. It's now directed by my colleague, Dr. Suzanne Pinna. And I'm connected just more broadly with training in neuropsychology. So I was a board member of the Association of Internship Training Centers in Neuropsychology and am a former president of the American Board of Clinical Neuropsychology. So happy to be here and happy that there's so many neuropsychology students of color coming into the field. That was not the case when I started.
All right, so is it my turn? Peers, maybe?
I think so.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, sorry, Dr. Jackson, yes.
Okay, great. My name is Jamylah Jackson. I'm the director of psychology training at the Dallas VA. And so at our facility, we have an internship program. We have a clinical psychology fellowship program. We have a neuropsychology fellowship program that's managed by two of the neuropsychologists on our team. I'm board certified in clinical psychology and an associate professor at UT Southwestern Medical Center, which is our affiliated medical center. I did my internship training here at the Dallas VA and a postdoctoral fellowship at the Dallas VA, and they have not been able to shake me. I've been hanging on ever since. So half of my job is to be director of psychology training. The other half of my job is director of mental health education and training for the staff. So looking forward to hearing from you all, talking with you guys today about recruitment and really excited about potentially diversifying the field.
Hi, everyone. My name is Enitan Marcelle. I'm currently an intern at the Children's National Hospital in DC. My home program is UC Berkeley, so I've just been kind of back and forth across the country recently between grad school and internship. And my interest is in pediatric neuropsychology in particular, and I'm excited to be able to talk with everyone today.
And I am Celita Owens. I am a student at Immaculata University, which is, I'm from New Orleans, so I always get this part wrong. It's somewhere 20 to 35 minutes away from Philly. And I am at the Bath VA, which is a very rural area, with a rotation in neuropsychology, as that's my primary interest. Looking forward to speaking with you guys.
Alrighty, great. And I think Dr. Williams is in this as well. I'll be a little bit late to the party if Dr. Williams wants to go ahead and introduce themselves. And he just got in, so let's give him a second. Dr. Williams, do we have you there?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can. Great.
Excellent. My apologies. I had to switch computers. My name is Bryman Williams. I'm a native of Louisiana. I've been in Mississippi since 1996. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, licensed in Louisiana and Mississippi. I've been the program director, the director of clinical training at Jackson State's clinical psychology doctoral program since 2008. I'm listed as associate DCT because as of January, I'm gradually taking a step back, and one of my colleagues has taken over. I've put in my time, so I'm gradually handing responsibilities over to her. Jackson State is one of only 2 historically Black colleges that has a APA accredited clinical psychology program. So I'm excited to be here and have an opportunity to share whatever knowledge I can with these beautiful young people.
Alrighty, great, great. So now that we have everybody here, one of the first questions, or the questions to kind of start the discussion, and please, if you all have questions, please enter them in the chat and we will try to get to them as we can. Does COVID change how we interview or how interns are interviewing, and or what are the changes that COVID is bringing to the table? Dr. Stringer, we'll start with you, and if you want to chime in on that perspective.
Sure. Yeah, so we had a class of interns who were training with us when the pandemic started, and looking at how that class fared, I think the interns who did the best were the ones who were flexible and adaptable. So I think it's probably put a premium on those qualities. We're having to do things differently. We'll be doing interviews differently, than we have in the past. And so I think, being able to kind of go with the flow, roll with the punches, being willing to jump in and try different things that might feel a little bit risky, and being flexible and comfortable with not always knowing what the outcome of what we're doing is going to be. I think those are going to be kind of the qualities that really will be critical, going into this very uncertain year that we still have ahead.
If I can chime in, this is Dr. Williams. Yeah, the flexibility is certainly going to be an issue. In particular, the entire interview process, it changes things. We've had some changes that we've incurred on our on-campus clinic in terms of teletherapy and things of that nature. So it's undeniable that you need to have a high level of flexibility and level of preparedness, being able to multitask, all those things that will be very essential in helping you have a smooth transition into the process and successfully make it. But I completely agree with the level of flexibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would just add that for interviews, it's always so important to control the things that you can control. There's so much that has to do with an interview process or an interview day that is completely outside of your control, but control the controllable. So make sure your Wi-Fi works. A lot of this is going to be virtual. If you have, a janky Wi-Fi situation, or maybe you're going to be using the internet, but also your significant other is going to be on it, and your neighbor also uses your Wi-Fi sometimes. Like all the things that try to work around those things so that if there are technical difficulties, it's not things that you're afterwards maybe kicking yourself and saying, I crossed my fingers and I hope that wouldn't happen, even though I know it kind of always happens. And doing the things that are within your power to optimize your comfort, because it's already stressful during interviews. And so you don't want to also be stressed out about kind of non-professional, like academic kinds of things as well. I think another way that the pandemic is likely to change the interview process is that a lot of it is likely to be virtual. And so that makes it a little more challenging to get a feel for the personality and the culture of a program and things like that. So kind of thinking about what are some things you want to keep an eye out for? What are some questions you might want to ask about to try to get a sense of the culture of a program? When you're not there physically, you can't see the staff kind of interacting in the hall together and things like that kind of give you a sense of how formal or informal a program is, or you know, how much you might fit into whatever they have going on within their program or within their organization. So I think thinking about how you can get creative with trying to suss that out in a virtual format.
Yeah, I might jump in again and just say also, I think it raises a whole new set of questions that you want to ask, you know, training centers. You know, you need to have a sense of what your level of comfort is going to be, you know, working with, you know, potentially, you know, COVID-19 positive patients, coronavirus positive patients. And you want to know what the site is doing to take care of its trainees as well. You know, most sites are under a lot of financial pressure these days, and you want to make sure that the site is prioritizing this health and safety and education of its trainees and putting that over, you know, any other considerations. So finding ways to tactfully ask those kinds of questions, you know, I think are going to be important this year. And but also just knowing clearly what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with, and you know, and knowing how far you are, you know, you're willing to stretch.
Any comments from our intern panelists? Have you been impacted by, in terms of interviewing, by the pandemic or the virtual aspect of it?
I think what we on the intern side have realized is going to be different for us is that we will be doing the Q&As, of course, with the students virtually. So last year we were able to meet the current interns in person, talk to the current interns in person, and that will be being done virtually. And I think that while a lot is changing, I know that when I was interviewing, I was really told that it's important to be able to talk to the current interns. And I think that even virtually that remains the same. So I would sort of pay attention to whether or not the sites make availability to talk to the interns and allow you to ask questions of what your training experience might look like virtually, if that's still the case by the time you're on internship. And I think that kind of remains the same in that way.
And I would say that for me, the experience was similar. However, Dr. Stringer mentioned some financial challenges that some sites might be facing. So while I was coming on as an intern, so I was doing the interviews and having that experience. However, my site isn't going to bring in a class next year. Therefore, I won't be able to be on the opposite side of that. So in that regard, it's impacted me and my ability to have that process. But as far as the interview process and what it might look like virtual, I guess from my experience with just doing telework while as an intern, I guess I could say that the things that's been mentioned about flexibility, being able to be able to speak to that if you're currently an intern, a practicum student that's teleworking at this time, and being able to demonstrate that because you've had that competency within the last few months, you can speak to being able to do it on internship.
Any do's and don'ts that people see, or people even just in general being on Zoom or using it as a platform? I hear comments about making sure your internet is up to speed. Are there any things that you just see as a taboo no that you shouldn't do in a Zoom meeting or anything like that?
Well, one thing is background. Put some effort into making sure that whatever the background you use is as professional as possible or as bland as possible, but you don't want anything that's distracting. Oftentimes I've seen people do interviews with the lighting behind them and it casts a shadow. So you want to make sure that whatever background you use is appropriate. My dogs bark a lot, so in anticipation of this, I had to kind of put them away so it wouldn't be disruptive. Those are little things that you want to make sure that you have in place because they don't see you and they don't have an opportunity to do the type of detailed interviewing that's typically done. You don't want anything to take away from your interview because they're working with very little information.
That was a very good tip. Put the dogs away. I like that.
Yeah, put the dogs away, yes.
So to our training directors first, and then, you know, the interns giving their perspective as, you know, coming in now, what are training directors looking to see from applicants during an interview primarily? If you had to maybe give 2 or 3 things that you want to see an applicant demonstrate, what are those things?
Well, by the time we have selected people to come for interviews, you know, pretty much everyone is equally qualified. You know, so we're not really using the interview to make judgments so much about, you know, ability level or, you know, quality of training. You know, all those things are kind of a given, and there's not a lot that distinguishes one intern from another in terms of one intern applicant from another in terms of ability. What we're looking for in the interview is the fit. And so, you know, I think, you know, what is important is for the applicant to really know, you know, our setting, you know our site, you know what we do, know who we are, you know, and to talk to us about the ways in which that fits with what they are looking for, you know, with who they are, with where they're going in their careers. So for us, it really is all about, you know, making sure that the fit is correct.
Yeah, I would echo that. In the VA, obviously, we see lots of adults. So sometimes we'll have applicants that will ask us lots of questions about opportunities to work with children and work with families, of which there might be a smattering of that. But if that's really what you want out of your training experience, then you're probably not a good fit for our program, right? And so we don't want you to match with us and then be disappointed about the lack of opportunities and the thing that you really want to do. So I think looking for goodness of fit, looking for, and this is going to be hard, I think, for programs to gauge virtually if they're doing virtual interviews, but we're also looking to try to get a sense of how this person engages with other humans. Do they seem like they would get along well with the cohort? Do they seem like, you know, if you tend to stay to yourself, that's totally fine. If it seems like you're rubbing people the wrong way in a lot of different settings, then that's also notable. It might not be a deal breaker, but it's something that may be discussed when we get ready to make the final rankings. And so I think one of the VA sites did a recent focus group trying to get a sense of what intern applicants were looking for in terms of virtual interviews. And so one of the things they talked about was wanting to have those small group interactions with trainees, with current trainees, as was alluded to a little bit earlier. So I know at our site and at some other VA training sites, they're definitely working to facilitate that. But we value our trainees as feedback too. And so if our trainees and their small groups with applicants are having negative experiences with them, that's notable. It's, again, you know, it's not going to be a deal breaker. It's not going to override all the other data that we have about people, but you know, we're looking for people that are going to work well with the cohort, that are going to enjoy being in our setting, enjoy what we have to offer, so that we can enjoy sharing, you know, the wonderful training experiences that we have at our site with the interns.
If I can comment on that, because I am interested on how the training sites are going to give applicants an opportunity to meet their trainees, because we always, in our preparation for our students to go on interviews, talk to them about, you know, when you go out to lunch with the trainees or have your 1-hour session with the trainees, that you are still being interviewed. And I know here at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, I've sat on some panels where they talk about it from a training director standpoint, how they have the trainees look at social media accounts, because that is something that you need to be wary of, that they do look your names up just to see the types of things that you post. So that's something else to be mindful of. But the trainees are not there just to have an hour to answer questions. They're also trying to find out information that they can let the training directors know about, if it's something that really sticks out about you.
Yeah. I will say that may be something that varies, you know, with site. You know, we actually ask our trainees to not interview, you know, but to be available to answer questions primarily, and to, you know, to basically let the applicants, you know, the candidates relax some, you know, ask the questions that they might not want to ask, you know, of the faculty, if the trainees have strong opinions, they often find a way of letting us know, but we don't let them into the ranking meetings. We did have a particularly obnoxious group of interns one year who stood outside the window and held up a sign, but that was unusual.
I like that passion.
Yeah, they were quite passionate, actually, we'll say. But yeah, we want our applicants to have a chance when they can kind of just relax and let their hair down a little bit, and and really ask those questions that are maybe a little bit uncomfortable to ask in front of the faculty.
Yeah, and I think our goal with having folks meet with the interns is really for the applicants to get a sense of the extent to which our interns are cutting themselves at night. Do they seem like they're enjoying their training experience? Do they seem like happy and healthy individuals? Or does it seem like they're beaten down? Are they saying that they work 90 hours a week when I said that they only work 40 hours a week? Like, that's what we encourage our applicants, ask those kinds of questions, try to get a sense of kind of what's going on with them to see whether or not, you could see yourself living that life. For sure. But yeah, I think, and I remember experiencing this as a graduate student too, where applicants would get with the graduate students and just kick their feet up on the desk and just totally leave interview mode, like slow down. You're still being interviewed. I mean, the trainees are not our moles. We're not looking for them to dig up dirt on you, but when people do kind of unusual things or just say out and out that they're not interested in a site or something like that, the trainees might report something like that, for sure.
So posing a question to our trainees, was there a certain setting or let's say, the difference between a VA versus an academic medical center in terms of the interview style or the questions that were posed to you? And if so, were there any questions that were really tough or challenged you to really think about your answers?
I guess I could speak to not necessarily questions that were tough, more than scenarios that were more challenging. And because I am aware of everything is an interview, everything is a part of the interview, I recognize that the task that was being asked was grand and probably not necessarily achievable, but how I was able to react to it was more than likely what was being assessed. And the task was to, and I think when I looked at some of the questions, and I might be tapping into that a little bit, but somebody asked about case presentation. But the question was regarding a case, and they gave data, background, and asked me to summarize the data and do treatment recommendations in 15 minutes. So the likelihood of me being able to complete all of that in 15 minutes was, it wasn't very likely. However, when you're on the opposite side of that and you're trying to put your best foot forward, it was very anxiety producing. And I'm not a person who's typically anxious. So that was even more, it was a lot. It was a lot. So I would say kind of being able to be calm and manage your emotional experiences throughout the interview process might be even more important than not necessarily thinking about what am I a good fit, because as Dr. Stringer mentioned before, you likely are if you've already gotten an interview.
I think what definitely was consistent across just about every site that I interviewed at was the question of why this site. So regardless, that's really obviously one to be prepared to answer for each site that you're interviewing at. I think what varied was based on whether it was more of a generalist site or more of a neuropsych specific program. And I think that really guided what types of questions were asked after that. So the more neuropsych specific programs did give case conceptualization type questions and things like that. The more generalists may have asked more broad, sort of just tell me about an interesting case type questions. So that was where I saw the most significant differences in the types of questions. I think there were definitely some sites that just asked sort of strange and bordering on inappropriate personal questions, like, you know, would you really move here, or things like that. And I think what I was told by my advisor was that just gives you information about the site that's useful. So thinking about if there are kind of more interpersonally difficult situations that you encounter, that may be something important to keep in mind with respect to the site style overall.
Okay, thank you for that. So one of the other questions that we have is to our interviewers. Is there a go-to question that you have, or maybe this is giving away the answers to the test or giving away the questions to the test? Is there a go-to question that you go to that really kind of lets you know what you need to know about an applicant?
Like during an interview?
Yes, during an interview. Yes, I'm sorry.
One magic question that tells me 100% yes or no, this person will be great here. No, I don't think so. There isn't one particular question. I mean, the whole point of the interview is that it's supposed to be a series of questions that help to color and inform the idea that we're getting about who an applicant is and the extent to which they would fit in well here. I do think, and this is true for job interviews as well as internship and postdoc interviews, but you learn a lot about a program from the questions that they ask. So I think pay attention to that. Oftentimes as someone who's being interviewed, you're feeling really anxious and you're really hyper-focused on how you address the question. But I do think it's important to take a step back and think about the question that's being asked, because the question will oftentimes tell you a lot about the priorities of sites and what they're looking for in terms of their trainees and what their trainees do. So I would say that it is important to pay attention to what's asked and what's not asked. That maybe is not a big priority for that particular site.
If I can piggyback on, what you said regarding questions, because, we do mock interviews to prepare our students to do these interviews. And I always nail home to them that always have at least 2 good questions to ask at the end of the interview. When they ask you, do you have any questions? Don't say no. Always have some really good question, even if it's about, where are interns after they leave here? What are the opportunities for doing postdocs? What are the interns doing now when they leave 3-4 years down the road, which is all data that they maintain. But when they ask you a question, it does say a lot when you don't have any questions. You should come in with follow-up questions after the interview is done. So it does say a lot about your background or your what type of schooling that you've had in terms of the program you left. If you don't have any questions, or the questions and you don't want to ask a question that's clearly listed on the website too. So make sure it's a very thoughtful question that may not have been addressed, but you don't want to ask something that would make me say, well, that's on the website. You should have saw that if you thoroughly read the website or our web link.
I will underscore that as well. What Dr. Williams said, I mean, my favorite question is, what questions do you have for me? And I actually start interviews that way. I let the applicants ask me their questions first, partly to help them relax. So, they put me on the spot by talking rather than my putting them on the spot. But also, I really want to see that they are interested, and that they have a lot of curiosity and enthusiasm. My other favorite question is it's actually more of a statement, and that is to tell me about your research. And I like to hear applicants who are really passionate about the work that they've been doing. It may not be their chosen life's work, that they're doing their dissertation on. Not all of us get to do that. But nonetheless, I want to see that they picked something that was really interesting to them and that they're excited to talk about. And they can keep me interested, as well. That, 2 minutes into it, I'm not bored to death because I can pick up on their enthusiasm and interest.
Yeah, I think also being prepared to answer questions about something that's maybe not on your CV. So tell me something about yourself that I wouldn't get from just reading your CV is a question sometimes that's asked that I think can cause a lot of anxiety for people because you're like, well, I need to give some kind of information that makes me seem interesting, but I don't want to say I watched the wrong show because maybe they judged me for that, or who knows what. So thinking about the fact that you may get questions like that and thinking of, and practicing and thinking about what is an acceptable response, what is something you can live with, but also something that does give them a window into who you are as a human, not just as a budding psychologist, but sometimes people also want to get to know who you are outside of your professional life.
To our interns, were there any questions that you felt really helped you sell yourself, or really say like, wow, I really nailed that question?
I remember one experience that wasn't necessarily made me feel like I nailed it, but I could tell that the person who interviewed me actually read my material, and it made me feel like, okay, that was almost a direct quote. Like it felt like they were actually interested in me and my process. So I could see how that person processed information and just quite frankly felt interested in the material that I put together, and that helped me feel at ease. So I think, as Dr. Jackson was mentioning, how you experience them is just as important as how you are presenting yourself at that placement or site during that interview. So I think that there's some questions like I've been asked, what music are you listening to? Those are, nice personal questions, which was, I didn't expect that at all. And then of course, I mentioned the scenario earlier that was a lot less kind. But I think overall, the thing for me was to, again, be confident in what I have done thus far and being able to communicate that.
I think for me, the interviews that, not necessarily that I think I, nailed a question in particular, but that I left feeling the best about were definitely those that turned into more of a conversation than an interview. And I think that happened when, sort of, as you mentioned, folks had really, I could tell that they looked at my work and we could have a conversation about it, or I had looked into their work and I had specific questions or interests overlapped in certain ways. And I was really able to sort of engage in that way, as opposed to kind of just a back and forth answering questions that were asked. And so if there's an opportunity to, at the end of the day, you're talking to a person, another human being. So I think if there's an opportunity to have a conversation as opposed to, just having a typical interview, I think those were the ones that I felt best about.
So at the end of the day, it sounds like the fit is the and how well you connect with those individuals, because you're going to be working with them for a year and potentially longer. So it's thinking about how to make that interpersonal connection seems to be a theme that I'm hearing throughout a lot of the answers, which is great. I want to switch gears. There's a couple of questions in the chat about being minority applicants applying for internships. And so one of them is asking, how should interns or intern applicants deal with microaggressions potentially from training directors or staff? This person said that they've heard from previous applicants that there may have been some uncomfortable situations. And so how do you handle that? And so I'll ask the interns first, have you had any experiences like that? How did you handle it? Or how did you hear about other people handling it?
I personally didn't on my interview trail, but a close friend of mine definitely did. And she sort of just took it as a reflection of the site. And I think that is one way to sort of handle that. She didn't kind of bring it up in particular, but did note that this was a question that this person that she would potentially be training under thought was an appropriate question to ask, and that meant something important to her. So just, again, thinking about the fact that you are interviewing this site as much as they're interviewing you, I think is important to keep in mind. And that was sort of how my friend dealt with her experience in particular.
And I can't say that I had that experience either. But I think, the internship process in terms of where you are able to apply, and I think that we'd like to believe that, we are all in this profession and there people are culturally sensitive, et cetera. But there might be experiences like that that you might have. And I think just like it was previously mentioned, just kind of take that into account when you're ranking or if you decide to rank that placement.
And to my training directors, thinking about you come across a lot of practicum students and people that are going to be applying for internship who you probably mentor and things like that. Do you ever coach them on how to handle those types of issues when race may be brought up in a situation, or how would you go about, asking questions about, what's the climate of the internship site? What's the climate of the environment that I'm stepping into?
Those are very sensitive questions. And, I don't know that you can, truthfully, well, I should say, I mean, there are certain behaviors which are so blatant that, if it happens even in an interview, you may need to say something. I mean, and because you may have decided at that point that you're not going to go to that site no matter what. And, and I can imagine some things would be said that would, put me in that frame of mind. But I think most things, if they come up, you're probably not going to want to deal with them in your interview. I think it does provide you with information about the site, particularly if it's something that's happening pervasively, or if it's happening repeatedly with even just one person at the site. You have to do things seriously about whether or not this is the place that you want to spend this critical time in your life. But yeah, I can't think of a lot of really good ways of dealing in the moment, with a microaggression. I can imagine, and again, this would probably result in my, not wanting to go to a particular site, but I can imagine giving a site feedback later on, about what the experience was like, for you as a person of color.
And I think it could be something that if there are other trainees, or if there are trainees of color there that you have opportunities to talk with, you might bring it up, not necessarily bring up what your microaggression experience was, but you might touch base with them about how they are enjoying their training year, if they feel like the supervisory staff is supportive of diversity, and is it a culturally inclusive environment. I think those are totally fair questions to ask, to try to get a sense of, is this a one-off of one person said something, but it doesn't reflect kind of the way the staff thinks about these things, or is this that, the other person, and our trainees are invested in being in APA accredited programs, but they're not so invested that they're gonna sell you down the river and try to convince you to come to a program where they're not happy. I think our trainees, most trainees, tend to be honest about, even if they might not say it directly, they'll say it indirectly in such a way that you get it, to convey that this is a place that's supportive, or that it's a place that's maybe a little bit less so.
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. And not only are we in the midst of a pandemic, but we're dealing with some social justice related matters that impacts everyone, regardless of our training, regardless of our regard to diversity, fairness, and multiculturalism. I think that if you experience any situation, you're at a point in your life that whether that's a place that you want to spend 1 year of your life. I think that if there are minority interns and you have an opportunity just to ask about the climate, you should. I think that it's a question that you can ask about during the interview. As if someone asks you, do you have any questions? Well, in terms of diversity, what's how are over the course of years minority interns? Those are important things that would be important for me to know. I don't think it's an age where you should bite your tongue if you have a question associated with diversity that you want to ask, but don't be mindful of the climate that we're in. And I tell our students when they are preparing to go on internships, I help them with their essay questions that they answer when they apply, and I always ask them when they go, because we have a multicultural focus in our program. So most of our dissertations have that type of focus. And when they're talking about, when it comes to goodness of fit, I let them know that some of these sites don't have exactly those experiences that you're looking for. So you should apply to the sites that will be able to give you the cultural experiences that you have. But, you know, as it relates to any comments that or any type of microaggression, I think you should consider whether, you know, weigh the level of it, because it just may be one person out of the group, but you should take it seriously and make a decision about, you know, is this a place that I want to rank high or rank at all? Because understand that the climate that we're in right now, and psychologists, although we've had the appropriate training and we know better, we're not insulated from it because we're humans.
And I would just add, taking into consideration, especially because I am in I'm upstate New York, very rural. I'll just leave it at very rural. And so think about that. Where you will be physically located will probably lend up a good bit of information as to what your cultural experience might be. And that's not something that I can say, honestly, that I put very high on my list, as it's been I guess it's been a normal training experience to train as a minority student. So it's not something that I would have placed high on my list of importance when thinking I would like to be around people that are multicultural and diverse in various ways. But I will say that having to be on practicum twice a week is very different than being on internship every day around people that don't look like you, don't talk like you, don't sound like you, don't think like you, which is great. But when it feels isolating, that's something to consider.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, and something that really is ultimately a personal decision about where you want to spend this year. I mean, I can reflect on, I'm from New Orleans, which was a majority Black city when I was there, and did my graduate work at University of Georgia, and I did not care for the lack of diversity in Athens, Georgia. So when it was time to apply to internship, I figured any APA accredited place is going to give me great training, but I want to live in a real city, and that is my priority. And so I applied to sites that were only in major cities because that was a personal priority for me. So I think it's okay to give value to your priorities and not to feel like, well, I'm not supposed to care about that. I'm only supposed to care about the extent to which they're going to have me doing, you know, whatever kinds of batteries and things like that. I think it's okay to give value and give voice to your personal preferences, and to weigh how comfortable you're going to feel, not just in the department, but in the region where you're training.
You know, I think it is very much a personal decision. You know, the other reality is that neuropsychology is a very competitive field. And, you know, the better the training that you can get during internship and fellowship, the better career you will have. You know, so, you know, it may very well be that the place you want to go may not be the place you want to spend your life, but it might be the place that you want to be for a year, because you will come away from that having this awesome skill that you would not have gotten otherwise. So you do have to think about, you know, what the priority is going to be for that year. I do remember, so I had a both pleasant and unpleasant experience during fellowship. You know, after 1 year of fellowship, they offered me a faculty position. I won't say where I was, but you know, it was double the money and pretty much the same amount of work, and I accepted it. But I did have very much the sense that the jail doors were clanging shut, because this was clearly not a place that I wanted to live, and it was a place with, you know, with very few people of color. So it felt very different to know that I was going to do something for 2 years than to think that I might be doing this for, you know, a career period. You know, you can put up with a lot, you know, if you have to in a 2 year period, if you're getting amazing training, but it's hard to do that for your entire career.
Great. While we have a few more, about 13 more minutes, I want to switch gears a little bit, but give some time to kind of wrap up for some final thoughts. There are some individuals, so we're thinking about, like you said, these internship spots are so competitive. There's sometimes only 1 and 2 spots. We have some individuals in the talk today who come from maybe programs that don't have the traditional neuropsychology lean, meaning school psychology, counseling psychology. Is there anything that these individuals need to do differently to set themselves apart? Or is it, you know, does it go back to once you get the interview, we've seen that you're already a good applicant, you just need to have that interpersonal quality.
Yeah, I think the extent to which you kind of know things is helpful. It helps you set apart. Every program is going to kind of set up how they're ranking applicants and things like that a little bit differently. But for our sites, there are ratings that you get for the responses that you give during the interview. And so that's going to help to raise your ranking kind of level if you're answering questions and hitting, you know, all the little behavioral anchors or bullet points that we have for the different responses, for sure. So skill is going to matter. But I mean, for our program, it's not like we're just going to go by, okay, based on the numbers, this is the person's ranking. You know, we're also going to take into account some qualitative factors about the extent to which it seemed like this person was would be a good fit, or we feel like they knew more than they said. Like I could tell they were so nervous. I feel like they knew more than that. And in this other interview, because they each do 2 interviews, they did really well. So I really feel like this is not a, you know, number 12 person. It seems like a number 10 person. So there's some fluff in there that really does kind of speak to different interpersonal factors that people experience as they experience interviewing with you, and things that make you memorable versus someone else. So this is the person that used to be a ballerina or something really kind of random and out there. Used to sell widgets or something random that makes you stick out versus other people who maybe, you know, don't have those experiences.
Well, I guess I'll say, you know, Emory is a very competitive internship. You know, there's no way around, around that fact. But I will say, I think we are suckers for a really compelling story. You know, we have taken applicants, you know, who were perhaps not as well prepared because they just struck us as being people who had a unique mission. You know, we take a number of foreign applicants, you know, for that very reason. You know, we had an applicant, you know, from a part of the world, you know, that was torn with, you know, with civil strife. And, you know, this applicant's essay had one of our faculty members in tears. You know, they were nowhere near as well prepared as most of the other applicants, you know, that we ended up accepting that year. But we accepted that applicant because we bought into their mission. You know, we bought into why they wanted to be a neuropsychologist, and we wanted to be a part of getting them ready to have that career. So I guess I would say is, you know, if there are aspects of your training which are, you know, which perhaps disadvantage you, you know, I think you want to put an emphasis on the things which are uniquely, you know, true for you, and, you know, which might be very compelling and might overcome, you know, the negative impression that might arise from some of the weak things that, you know, that you bring.
The other thing that made me think about is enthusiasm. Sometimes the thing that bumps people up is just that this person seems like they would be a lot of fun to train. They don't know all the things that we want them to know, but they're so enthusiastic. They seem so open to feedback. I really would just love to work with this person. And so to the extent that you can convey that openness and willingness, and maybe even a little insight about your strengths and weaknesses, I think that goes a long way too.
I was just going to add from a training's perspective, the insight piece. So I'm not coming from a program that had any type of formal track in neuropsychology or things like that. And so I did choose to say that explicitly in my application, kind of say, given my interest in neuropsychology and given that I'm not coming from a more traditional program, I sought to, you know, supplement my experiences in these ways, and sort of highlighted what initiatives and steps I took to gain that training that maybe wasn't as immediately available to me. So I think that is a way to think about it if you are coming from a program that's maybe doesn't have that explicit neuropsych focus or whatever it might be. Kind of highlight how you have shown that this is what you're interested in.
And that would be the same for me. My program doesn't have a focus in neuropsych, but In addition to that, my interests have been sort of like a journey, so to speak, where I have enjoyed many of the things that I've done along the way. And I just so happen to really, really enjoy that the most. And when you look at a person's resume who looks like they have enjoyed many different things, then it may seem like they don't have a specific focus. But I would say gratefully, I learned that pretty early within my doctoral program that I was interested. So although some previous years looked very general, I'm one of those people who very much enjoy therapy. And I know that that's like people who are in neuropsych don't really enjoy therapy, but I do, I really do. So being able to have whatever you're interested in, be interested in it. Don't kind of shy away from what you like because it doesn't match fully 100%, because at the end of the day, you know, if you've gotten that interview, then they can see clearly that you've been able to focus your energy in one specific place, even though you might have broad interests.
Okay, so we're about 6 minutes out, and I think it would be, I guess, a good time to just kind of wrap up and give each panelist a chance to share some final thoughts about their experience with interviewing or their experience of just interviewing people, and just some imparting words that you have for any of the applicants that are looking to apply this time around.
Well, I'll say, get your rest before your interviews, obviously. Hopefully you're planning them out and spacing them out as much as you can so that you can, recharge your energy between interviews. There are going to be some that you may experience where you have to make a choice because they're not going to budge on the time. And that's always a decision that you have to weigh which one is more important, because I've seen students try to squeeze them all in, but sometimes they draw a line in the sand and say, this is the only time that you can interview. I think it'll be more flexibility now since pretty much all of them are going to be done virtually. But preparedness is the thing. I talked earlier about limiting whatever distractions that's in your space when you do the interview, but trying to space them out as much as you can so that you have enough time to prepare and you're not rushing and limiting the amount of distractions that you have.
Yeah, I concur with that. I think spacing them out is important. And actually, one of the positives of having so many virtual interviews could be that you don't have to bother with the travel that weighs you down emotionally and psychologically during the interview process. And so use that time effectively. Make sure that you review the brochure of whatever the site is. You have the bonus of you could have the brochure in front of you because you're at home or at your desk or whatever. But I know one of the things that tends to work against people is when it's clear that this is just one of the sites that they're applying to get to their requisite 18 sites or whatever their graduate advisor told them they needed to do in order to be competitive, right? And so they didn't review all the stuff. They don't seem really interested. So again, control the controllable. You can control whether or not you print out the brochure and you have reviewed it the night before, the morning of, what have you, your interview. If there are questions that you're afraid of, like I hope they don't ask this kinds of question, I encourage people to engage in opposite action. Practice those questions. Don't just cross your fingers and hope it doesn't happen. Look in the mirror and practice coming up with a response for that question that you feel good about. And in the moment, if they ask the question, it may not be as awesome as it was in your bathroom mirror, but it'll be closer than if you had not run that experiment. So I encourage you to just, be confident, be as prepared as you can, and you'll do fine.
Well, I'll go back to what I think we all said, and that is that a lot of the interview is about finding the right fit. I think for you as well, it should be about finding the right fit. You want to find the internship that will work for you. And so I think it's important that you know yourself, know where your career is taking you. You don't have to have everything nailed down by internship year, but you want to be getting pretty close to having most of it nailed down and know the kind of career you want to have and the place that that you want to train so that you can get to that kind of career. I personally just like order, and I like to see that, that the applicant, isn't all over the place, but really is headed in a particular direction. And I can, it's okay to have lots of influences, but I want to see how all those things have come together to put you in that chair right now, and why you're in that chair, and that there's a good story that I can believe in. That's kind of the thing that I'm looking for. The other thing I will say too is what we're going to miss most about, not being able to interview in person is the lunch. We do an amazing lunch at Emory. We are known for this. It's a catered meal with servers and everything, and it's an awesome experience because we want to take good care of our candidates, and we're going to have to try to figure out how to show our candidates that kind of love virtually, because we can't give them this awesome meal that we normally would do. But look for the site to want to take care of you. They're taking you on, and you want to be at a place that's going to nurture you and take good care of you for that year. So, they should be trying to find some way of communicating that to you. So I would look for that.
Any wisdom from our current interns and parting to those that are in a position where you once were? Any thoughts for them?
I think, I'm sure this has been said already, but have fun. I think for me, after the nerves of the first one, I really kind of got into a place where I, was able to realize, I've been studying for this for a long time, and these are things that I'm interested in. These are things that I know. These are things that I enjoy talking about. And so it actually became a little bit of an enjoyable experience after, the first couple of rounds. And I think the downside of not being in person this year was also that I was able to meet people and see people at multiple sites and things like that, and get to know my peers in the field in that way. And so if there are any, waiting room Zoom opportunities, take advantage of those and kind of talk to people that are going to be in your career cohort moving forward.
I think for me, the most helpful part of the process preparing for an interview was, I think it's been said a couple of times, the preparation. So I kind of did different levels of that, where I asked family, I prepared questions and I asked them, and that's a very low level anxiety sort of situation because they don't know much and they'll think you sound really good. And then you can ask a peer who does know more, and then they can give you constructive feedback, and then ask someone who is a mentor who you're a little bit more intimidated by. And that way I felt a lot more prepared going into the actual interview.
All righty, great. So that is our time for today. I want to thank all of our panelists for giving their time, their wisdom, their expertise to these individuals who are going through a very exciting but scary time. We thank you all for joining SBN and ANST. My kind of wisdom, I'm a second-year fellow at the University of Virginia right now. So I've gone through all of these experiences as well. Have a level of confidence in yourself, not braggadocious or in any way, but have some confidence that you're worthwhile in being here. If you get those interviews, take that hey, we like this applicant, and so sell them on how great of a person that you are. So that's what we want to do with these webinars, is to let you all know that, hey, you all can get to these goals and hit these milestones. So good luck to everyone. Good luck to you all. Please try to keep us informed. Join the organization. We're looking for more people to join our ranks so that we can do more things like this for others who are coming up along the way. So just keep that in mind and take care of yourselves, and self-care. Take care of that self-care while you do this as well. So thank you for your time, and we look forward to the next one.
Nice to meet everyone.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.